Well, it's all encompassing. And even last week, remember that the figures at the MPC remains unchanged. That's the monetary policy rate, cash reserve ratio has remained unchanged. And these are all issues that are affecting the fundamentals of the Nigerian economy. Well, to discuss this, I have in the studio with me Chief Economist with PricewaterhouseCoopers in person of Andrew Nevrins. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today on Business Nigeria.
Tolo, I'm always very happy to be here at TVC.
Let's start with the MPC figures now. Did you expect more than that from the MPC coming up with, after not having meetings, the first meeting for the year, retaining all rates?
Well, I mean, remember, it was delayed because of the Senate, right? And the confirmation, so we have 2 new deputy governors, 3 other MPC members, if correct. They're new at this, so I'm not surprised that they just held the status quo. I would have been surprised if they came. There was no particular economic reason to move, and I would have thought their first meeting, they're going to start doing new things.
Well, let's look at the figures we have here. The monetary policy rate remains at 14%, liquidity ratio at 30%, and cash reserve ratio at 22.5%. Now, with these figures, many still argue that the MPC would have even touched the interest rate in particular. What do you think about that? But many say the economy still remains very fragile. When do we solidify our economy? Or when will the economy
I think, I mean, people who are arguing for a reduction in the interest rate, I think the issue right now is that our borrowing, federal government borrowing, is still very high, crowding out investments. So the room to bring down that rate is not very much. The solution to bringing down interest rates in the country is to do better on tax collection. We're not collecting enough tax, so our deficit's too high, so the government borrowing's too high, and is crowding out the private sector. But just the prime rate moving at 14, 13, 12 is not going to solve our issues.
Indeed. Now let's look at inflation. That's another very important factor. But there's been an increase for 14 to 14.3%. That's at the last figures from the NBS, Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, saying that the rate of inflation now stands at 14.3%. And some even expect that there could be a decline further, maybe to single digits. I don't know when you think we could have that.
Well, we know that last year in the fall, the governor of the CBN predicted that this year we could come to single digits. I think it's a reasonable expectation. But again, the reality is, in a way, prices could go down. If our economy was more efficient, if infrastructure worked better, if power was better, you wouldn't see prices go up. You'd actually see prices go down. The reason things are expensive in Nigeria is because of our infrastructure challenges.
That is a major issue, and we need to address this to actually grow the economy, even injecting funds into the economy and talk about infrastructure projects. We are yet to really feel it down there. People still don't have food on their table. When will these figures really translate to reality where people will be able to get food on their table? When are we going to get to that point, Andrew?
Well, I think that you can see with your introduction, I mean, a lot of the spending has been delayed. It hasn't been passed through the legislative process, so it's queued up. I mean, but this administration has really allocated more to basic infrastructure than past administrations. We just need to get the projects going. And in addition, there's a big overhang that's harming the country where there's a lot of contractors that have not been paid. If the federal government could see its way to paying those contractors, it would help a lot to put liquidity back into the system, relieve a lot of the poverty around the country, people who haven't been paid in a long time. So those are 2 things that we just need to be going faster, at basic level faster.
So someone talked about growth of about 6%, and that's what we expect. I don't know when we'll get to that. We don't have that yet. Well, still talking inflation, some figures before now. January, we're at 15.13%. And that's from December, which was 15.37%. Now, let's look at food prices. Most of this growth, like we all know, is driven by oil price. The price of foodstuffs still been on the high side, and we expect bumper harvest. A lot has been invested in agriculture. Andrew, we're yet to get it right in agriculture.
But I mean, PwC put out its report a few weeks ago on rice production. I think there's both good news and bad news. I mean, and you made the point, there is actually more agricultural production, and particularly around rice, but lots of people working on other crops. But we're still not as far as we need to go. Part of the issue is mechanization. We don't have a system. I mean, an individual farmer cannot buy a tractor. So how do you set up a system so there's separate corporations that supply mechanization when you need it to the entire farm community? But in rice, I think we're relatively optimistic. The other issue about rice is it's easier to store and move around. So if you compare it to tomatoes, where we lose most of our tomatoes, rice, actually, we're going to solve the problem. And we're about halfway there in PwC's view.
We can't talk about this and not mention the issue of ease of doing business. That's very important here now. You know, a lot has been done talking about customs and all of that. But what about land, you know, talking about land use and all of that, registration and, you know, acquiring land. What do you think about that vis-a-vis the housing challenge and infrastructure which we face in this part of the world?
Well, I think our view is that we haven't paid enough attention to the real estate sector. So if you look globally, real estate's about almost 60–65% of all assets, because everyone needs a place to live. Every business needs a place to operate, even if it's an internet business. So the land registry is the heart of all this, because once you know who has if you know you have the property, you're going to improve it. If the bank knows you have the property, they're going to give you a mortgage. If the securities market knows you have the property, you can securitize it and drive the cost of financing down. But that's not working. And if our real estate market does not work, the rest of the economy cannot compensate for it. But the other thing that's very critical about real estate is it's a major employer. We want sectors that will absorb. We need 4 million new jobs a year. We need our young people to be working. So what are the two big sectors that absorb people? One is agriculture. The other one is real estate, because for every piece of real estate you need all the people supplying the building materials, but then on site you need to clear it, you need carpenters, you need masons, you need electricians, all skilled workers on that. So for us, real estate is critical, but the land registry is the heart of getting the real estate market to work.
And that's really what we need to look at. Now let's look at unemployment rate too. That's one that has also been very worrisome. As at Q3 of 2017, unemployment rate in Nigeria stood at 18.8%. That's the figure we have. Now, with all the efforts made, we've had the Empower scheme, even agriculture, so people have been empowered in the agricultural sector. We're still yet to get jobs right. The percentage of youths out there not having anything to do, it's worrisome. I mean, say we're sitting on the gunpowder.
Well, the schemes that the government has, even when they're successful, aren't large enough. As I said, we need 4 million jobs a year. So Empower, I mean, they tend to talk in tens of thousands, right? The only way we're going to get 4 million jobs a year is big government spending. Now, it's not a surprise that unemployment's going up, because our population growth rate's 2.7%. Our GDP only grew less than 1% last year. This year maybe grows a little over 2%. We're predicting in this show 2.6. So we're still not really alleviating unemployment. To alleviate unemployment, we need to do 6, 7, 8%. But again, to hit 6, 7, or 8%, you need agriculture and real estate to work. If those don't work as the biggest sectors, nothing else will compensate to get to the growth rate that drives down unemployment.
Economic Growth and Recovery Plan is one document that everybody has applauded by this government, looking at the projections there, the growth projection, job creation, and all of that, focus on power sector to activate SMEs and all of that. But some people still come out to argue that seems it's a tall order. How soon do we achieve this? Yes, there's been quarterly meetings being, you know, administered by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. How far have we really gone with implementing this beautiful document?
Well, I think the federal government has done a very good job of being focused on the right things. So ease of doing business, power, as you say, agriculture. I think the problem, though, for us is I think we need a clearer message that the federal government can only do so much. The states actually need to step up and do their part. So if just the federal government doing it will fail. So 2 weeks ago I was at the Ogun State Investor Forum. This was the fourth, it happens every 2 years. It's the last one in Governor Adeosun's tenure. I mean, they've done a fantastic job in Ogun State of staying focused on ease of doing business and bringing in big investment, and it shows in the numbers. It shows in their IGR, it shows their employment. But to make this happen nationwide is what we need. So we can't just have Governor Adeosun, Governor Ambodi focus on it. We need 36 governors working on it.
Okay, now we will take a break. Andrew will still be here. We'll be talking more about issues surrounding the Nigerian economy, particularly looking at fundamentals affecting all figures that we get from all of the agencies. Stay with us, it's Business Nigeria. Glad to have you back. Of course, you're still watching Business Nigeria, and Andrew Nevin is still here, Chief Economist with PricewaterhouseCoopers, giving insight into issues surrounding the Nigerian economy. Now, that break I was just thinking about internally generated revenue now from both federal and state government. I think there's been a boost, a very positive one on the side of the federal government since Babatunde Fowler took over. You know, what he did in Lagos, kind of replicating that at the federal level. But how far would you say we've gone, and what more expectations? What do you think we can do to get better?
Well, I think Lagos State has come a long way, and I had the privilege a few weeks ago. I met Oba Femi Pedro, who really drove a lot of that with the governor a decade ago. And of course, it's continued with Governor Ambodi after Governor Fashola. And I think what that shows is if you focus on this for a long period of time, you'll get a result. And I think that should be the lesson for other states. And again, in Ogun State with Governor Adeosun, they've been focused on a long time. They have really probably the second best IGR experience. So other states are now been following it, some for a few years. They're starting to get a result. So I think we're positive about it. But one of the most critical things is as we change administration, so as a governor retires or is defeated at the polls, the next governor has to stay with the program to make it successful. If they veer off the IGR program, you'll just set us back a decade.
Many of the states need to take advantage of what they have in-house. You know, we knew of the cocoa pyramids, the granite pyramids, the cocoa farmlands and all of that people used. In those days, they used to be millionaires. But now we don't take advantage of all of that anymore. We just focused on oil. And now even oil prices now back. It's better now. We're doing between $65 to $70. And now many say we're even forgetting diversification of our economy. What do you make of that?
Well, I think from an IGR perspective, one thing I would say to all the governors is focus on, again, the land issue. Right? And one of the things we've known in economics for 150 years, in a way, the most efficient tax is a tax on land. It doesn't move, you can identify it. If you have a land registry, I mean, the number that's suggested is you should be charging about 1% of the value. And if it's clear and concise in the cities, that'll go a long way for the states. It's harder to collect the IGR on VAT, there's more leakages and things like that. So that shouldn't be discouraged. But the number one tax source should actually, for IGR, should actually be land, in the cities particularly, not rural residents, but the cities. So
as we round up this segment now, the projections we've had for growth, for economic growth for the year 2018, I know PwC also has their stand. What do we expect as we move to before the end of the year? What are we thinking of? Do you really think we could get to single digits inflation?
I would be pleased if we did, but I could also see us not quite getting there, 10 to 12%. I mean that.
They're looking at the politics coming, the political year.
Yeah, I mean I think the issue is also with the GDP growth rate. I mean we put out our projections, which said under a very optimistic scenario we could get close to 4%, but our middle projections about 2.2 or 2.3, because the truth is with the election coming, some of these policy reforms are going to be delayed, and people that are going to invest in new factories or power business or consumer goods, they're going to delay their investment. So we need to make sure we take that into account, and we definitely need to make sure as we come out of the election, we continue this sort of structural reforms to drive the economy forward. At the end of the day, if we don't absorb 4 million young people into the workforce every year, we're going to have a major social calamity in this country.
I tell you, I can't wait until we just get out of this economy being fragile.
Well,
that
you feel
should be solid.
We're close, and there's a lot of people in the country who want to do the right thing, but we're not quite there yet.
Andrew Nevin, Chief Economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on Business Nigeria today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.